June 6, 1944, 6:47 a.m. Somewhere over Normandy, Oberleutnant Klaus Werner banks his Focke-Wulf 190 hard left, scanning the horizon through the armored glass of his canopy. Below him, the English Channel churns with what looks like every ship ever built. Werner is 24 years old. Has been flying combat missions over France since 1942. In that time, Hes shot down 7 Allied aircraft and survived encounters that killed better pilots than him. He knows this sky. He owns this sky. For 4 years, the Luftwaffe has ruled the airspace over France. 4 years of superiority, of hunting Allied bombers, of making the RAF pay in blood for every raid. Werner and pilots like him are the masters of this domain. But today, looking down at the invasion fleet, Werner feels something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. Mein Gott, he breathes into his radio. There are thousands of them. His wingman, Feldwebel Hans Richter, pulls alongside. Orders Herr Oberleutnant. Werner's eyes sweep the sky. Everywhere he looks, aircraft. American P-47 Thunderbolts flying high cover. Spitfires weaving protective patterns over the beaches. Medium bombers heading inland. And something else. Thick-winged fighters he doesn't immediately recognize. Stay in formation, Werner orders. Watch for stragglers. We pick our targets carefully. They dive toward a formation of what Werner identifies as Typhoons. British ground attack fighters. Heavy. Ungainly looking. Easy prey, he thinks. His finger moves toward the firing button. Then tracer rounds slice past his canopy. Werner yanks the stick hard right as a Spitfire screams past, guns blazing. The carefully planned attack dissolves into chaos. Werner twists and turns, trying to shake his pursuer while keeping track of his wingman. When he finally pulls away and climbs for altitude, Richter is gone. Werner searches the sky. Below, a parachute descends toward the invasion beaches. He can't tell if it's German or Allied. He turns for home, his fuel gauge dropping into the red zone. Behind him, the invasion continues. The ships keep coming. The aircraft keep coming. For the first time in 4 years, Werner wonders if the Luftwaffe's mastery of French skies might be ending. June 6, 1944. 8:30 a.m. RAF needs Orpoint, England. Squadron leader Mike Bryan checks his watch, then looks at the 12 Typhoon pilots gathered in the briefing hut. Outside, the distinctive throaty roar of Napier Sabre engines fills the air as ground crews prepare the aircraft. Gentleman, Bryan says, pulling back the curtain to reveal the map. As you've probably guessed, this is it. D-Day. No one speaks. They've been waiting for this moment for months. Our target is a chateau at La Meof near St. Lo. Intelligence believes it's a German headquarters. We go in with rockets, hit it hard, and get out. The Americans need every German command post knocked flat, and they need it done today. Bryan's eyes move across the faces of his 98 squadron pilots. Some are veterans with hundreds of hours in Typhoons. Others finished training weeks ago. All of them know the Typhoon's reputation. Powerful, deadly, and absolutely unforgiving of mistakes. One more thing, Bryan adds. There's more shipping in the channel than water. Stick to the flight corridors. Our own Navy will shoot at anything that deviates from the planned routes. Any questions? Flight Lieutenant Von Fiddle raises his hand. Weather, sir. Hazy. Low clouds over the beaches. We'll be flying below most of it. Bryan folds his arms. Which means the Germans will be too. Stay sharp. This is going to be the longest day of the war. 9:15 a.m. Cockpit of Typhoon M. Morn 415. Over the English Channel. Mike Bryan settles into the tight confines of his Typhoon's cockpit. Around him, The other 11 aircraft of 98 Squadron form up in loose sections of 4. The Typhoon is a brute. Its massive Napier Sabre engine, 24 cylinders arranged in an H configuration, generates 200 horsepower and a sound like nothing else in the sky. Some pilots call it a scream. Others more accurately call it a roar. Brian's hands rest on the control column. Even after hundreds of hours, the Typhoon demands respect. On takeoff, the massive 4-blade propeller generates so much torque that the aircraft tries to swing violently to the right. More than one pilot has crashed trying to fight it. But once airborne, once you've mastered its quirks and accepted its weight, the Typhoon becomes something else entirely. A weapon. Under each wing, 4 rocket projectiles sit on launching rails. Each rocket consists of a 3-inch cast-iron pipe with a 60-pound semi-armor-piercing warhead. When fired, the cordite motor accelerates the projectile to 1,600 feet per second. 8 rockets per aircraft. 12 aircraft. 96 rockets about to rain down on a German headquarters. Through the haze, Brian sees the coast of France approaching. Going radio silent, he transmits. Weapons hot. Follow my lead. The formation drops lower, skimming above the waves. Ahead, through breaks in the clouds, Brian sees the beaches. Thousands of landing craft. Troops wading through surf. Tanks rolling up the sand. The entire invasion laid out below him like a massive churning organism. And fires. Everywhere fires from Allied bombardment. There, Brian says, spotting the chateau. Target acquired. Sections prepare to attack. He pulls back on the stick. The Typhoon climbs to 8,000 feet. Below the chateau sits in its grounds Nazi flags flying from the rooftops. Brian rolls inverted and pulls through into a 60-degree dive. The world narrows to the target. The chateau grows larger in his gun sight. His thumb hovers over the rocket release. At 4,000 feet, he fires. 8 rockets streak away from the Typhoon's wings, trailing smoke. Brian doesn't wait to see the impact. He pulls hard on the stick, the G-force crushing him into his seat, black spots dancing at the edges of his vision. Behind him, the chateau erupts in a chain of explosions. 11 more Typhoons dive. 11 more salvos of rockets. By the time the last aircraft pulls away, the chateau is a burning ruin. Reform and return to base. Brian orders. As they turn for England, one pilot's voice crackles over the radio. There were more ships than sea. It's true. Looking down at the channel, Brian can barely see water between the vessels. An armada beyond imagination. And the Typhoons are part of it now. Flashback, September 1943. RAF, Warmwell, England. Pilot Officer Brian Sprague stands beside his first Typhoon, staring up at what he describes in his diary as a great monster. He's just arrived at 257 Squadron after training in Florida. He's flown Harvards and Hurricanes. Nothing prepared him for this. The Typhoon is massive. Nearly 6 tons fully loaded. The fuselage is thick and solid, the nose short and purposeful. The landing gear looks barely adequate for the weight. Most striking is the tail. The aircraft sits with its nose pointed skyward, the massive propeller dangerously close to the ground. "She's a bit temperamental," the crew chief warns. "Watch the torque on takeoff. And for God's sake, don't open the throttle too quickly, or shell swap ends on you." Sprague nods, trying to look confident. "One more thing," the chief adds. "Don't ever fly without your oxygen mask on. Carbon monoxide from the engine can leak into the cockpit. We've sealed everything we can, but..." He shrugs. "Just don't take it off." Sprague climbs into the cockpit. It's cramped but workable. The original canopy design, a car door style entry with heavy framing, restricts visibility. Later models will have a bubble canopy. But Sprague is flying an early version. The instrument panel is a maze of gauges and switches. Artificial horizon, airspeed indicator, fuel gauges, plural because the Typhoon has multiple tanks, engine temperature, oil pressure, gun sight, rocket controls. Ready for engine start? A voice calls from outside. Sprague gives a thumbs up, his heart pounding. The ground crew loads a starting cartridge into the Kaufman starter, essentially a shotgun shell that spins the propeller. You get 5 tries. After that, you're done for the mission. Sprague follows the checklist. Fuel mixture rich. Magnetos on. Throttle cracked open. Clear, he shouts. The ground crew fires the cartridge. Bang! The explosion is shockingly loud. The propeller spins. The engine catches with a cough that becomes a rumble that becomes a thunderous roar. Flames shoot back from the exhausts on either side of the cockpit. Smoke billows. The whole aircraft shakes. Sprague's hands grip the controls. The Typhoon wants to move, wants to fly, wants to tear itself free from the chocks holding it in place. He glances at the oxygen gauge. Flowing properly. He checks it twice more. The stories about pilots passing out from carbon monoxide poisoning aren't rumors. Tower, this is Typhoon Sugarfox requesting permission to taxi. Sugarfox, you're cleared. Good luck. Sprague releases the brakes. The Typhoon lurches forward. He immediately feels the weight. This is no nimble Spitfire. This is a truck with wings. Taxiing requires constant zigzagging. The nose is so high that Sprague can't see directly ahead while on the ground. He has to weave side to side to check for obstacles. Finally, the runway. Sprague turns into the wind, runs through the pre-takeoff checklist one more time. Rudder trim full left. Without it, the torque will kill him. Flaps 10 degrees. Mixture rich. Supercharger moderate. He takes a deep breath. Tower Sugarfox is rolling. Full throttle. The Sabre engine screams. 100 miles per hour tries to twist the aircraft to the right. Sprague's left leg is fully extended on the rudder pedal fighting the torque. The Typhoon accelerates down the runway at an angle not quite straight. 60 miles per hour. 70. 80. The tail comes up. Suddenly Sprague can see ahead. The runway stretches out before him. 100 miles per hour. The Typhoon lifts off, still trying to swing right. Sprague fights at his arms, trembling with effort. Gear up. The aircraft lurches as the wheels retract. Hes flying. For the next 45 minutes, Sprague puts the Typhoon through its paces. Gentle turns at first, then steeper banks. Climbs and descents. The aircraft is heavy, yes, but responsive. Stable. And absurdly powerful. He lines up on the airfield for landing. Gear down. Flaps down. Reduce power. The Typhoon settles onto the runway with a thump that rattles Sprague's teeth. He fights the torque again as he slows, finally bringing the aircraft to a stop. The crew chief approaches as Sprague shuts down the engine. How was it, sir? Sprague pulls off his oxygen mask and grins. Like riding a dragon. The Typhoon's journey to this moment has been anything but smooth. When the first prototype flew in 1940, it was intended as a high-altitude interceptor. The massive Napier Sabre engine was supposed to give it superior performance above 20,000 feet where it could hunt German bombers. It failed spectacularly. The engine suffered constant failures. Connecting rods broke. Cylinders cracked. Coolant leaked. Pilots joked that the Typhoon had 2 modes, not running, and running while on fire. Then the tail failures began. In 1942 and early 1943, Typhoons began disintegrating in flight. The rear fuselage would simply separate from the rest of the aircraft. Pilots had no warning. One moment flying, the next moment falling. 11 aircraft were lost this way. 11 pilots killed. Engineers discovered the problem: metal fatigue in the fuselage joints. A massive modification program reinforced every Typhoon in service. The failure stopped, but the damage to pilot confidence was done. The carbon monoxide problem was worse. Exhaust gases were seeping into the cockpit. Pilots would gradually lose consciousness, sometimes crashing before they realized anything was wrong. The solution was primitive, but effective: seal everything possible, and mandate that pilots never remove their oxygen masks in flight. By mid-1943, the Typhoon's reputation was in ruins. Several senior RAF officers wanted it scrapped entirely. But then something changed. At low altitude, below 10,000 feet, the Typhoon was faster than almost any German fighter. Its thick wings and heavy structure made it incredibly stable in dives, and those 420mm Hispano cannons could tear apart anything they hit. The Typhoon wasn't a high-altitude interceptor. It was a ground attack monster. In October 1943, 18-1 Squadron conducted the first operational test of a new weapon, the RP-3 rocket projectile. The results were devastating. A direct hit from a 60-pound warhead could destroy a tank, obliterate a building, sink a ship. By D-Day, 18 Typhoon squadrons were operational. Every pilot had mastered the aircraft's quirks. Every ground crew could rearm and refuel in 15 minutes. Every squadron had perfected the attack dive. 60 degrees from 8,000 feet fire. At 4,000 feet pull up hard enough to gray out. The troubled beast had become Britain's most feared ground attack aircraft. The Germans just didn't know it yet. July 8, 1944. Normandy beachhead, France. 7 weeks after D-Day, the Allied advance has stalled. The invasion succeeded in establishing a foothold, but the Germans have turned every hedgerow, every village, every crossroads into a fortress. The American, British, and Canadian forces are trapped in a narrow strip of coastal territory barely 10 miles deep, and the Germans are dug in. Panzer tanks hide under the thick canopy of Norman apple orchards, invisible from the air. Camouflage nets cover entire columns of vehicles. Roads that appear empty on reconnaissance photos are actually packed with troops and equipment concealed under trees. The Luftwaffe has largely withdrawn from daytime operations. Allied air superiority is too complete, the cost too high. But on the ground, the Wehrmacht is fighting with the skill and determination that has made them the most feared army in the world. For the Typhoon squadrons now based in France, this means hunting an enemy that doesn't want to be found. 2:00 p.m. Airfield B.5, Camilly, France. Flight Lieutenant Geoffrey Gray stands beside his Typhoon, studying the map with his section leader. Around them, the airfield, really just a bulldozed strip of farmland with metal matting laid down, bustles with activity. Gray's 180 of Sierras. 104. The fear. It means Typhoon strikes can be delivered within minutes of the request. It means attacks can happen within 200 yards of Allied troops. It means the Germans can't hide behind the front line anymore. It also means Gray and his fellow pilots are being asked to dive into concentrated flak while flying low enough that one hit means certain death. Mount up, the section leader orders. Gray climbs into his Typhoon. The familiar routine: straps, oxygen check, controls check. He tucks a photograph of his wife into the instrument panel. Every flight. Every mission. The Kaufman starter fires. The Sabre roars to life. 4 Typhoons taxi to the runway, rockets loaded, cannons armed. 3 minutes later, they're airborne. 2:35 p.m. 7,000 feet above Normandy. Gray settles into the orbit patterns, scanning the ground below. The battlefield is a maze of destruction. Bomb craters. Burning vehicles. Collapsed buildings. And everywhere the geometric precision of German defensive positions. Trenches, bunkers, gun emplacements. Victor Charlie Papa. This is Typhoon leader, the section leader calls. On station. And ready. A different voice responds. American accent surprisingly calm. Typhoon Leader VCP. We have armor at grid reference. Gray plots the coordinates. Edge of a wood just as briefed. Marking now, the VCP says. Below, a red smoke shell arcs through the air and lands at the tree line. Red smoke billows. Typhoon Leader target is German armor concentration, 200 yards south of smoke. You are cleared hot. Watch for friendlies on the north side of that wood. Acknowledged. Typhoons going in. The section leader rolls inverted and pulls into a dive. Gray follows his section mate tucked in beside him. The altimeter unwinds. 7,000 feet. 6,000. 5,000. Flak begins to burst around them. Black puffs of smoke. Then orange flowers with dark centers. The dangerous ones close enough to damage aircraft. Gray sees the target now. Shapes under the trees. Tanks. Half-tracks. Vehicles clustered together. They're 4,000 feet. His thumb moves to the rocket release. The targeting reticle settles over the tree line. Fire. 8 rockets leap from the rails with a sound like tearing canvas. The Typhoon, suddenly 700 pounds lighter, lurches upward. Gray hauls back on the stick, pulling 4 Gs, 5 Gs. His vision narrows to a tunnel. Blood drains from his head. He climbs. Behind him, explosions ripple through the wood. Good hits. Good hits, the VCP shouts. I count 3 fires. 2 secondaries. Secondary explosions. Fuel or ammunition cooking off. The 4 Typhoons reform above the battlefield. VCP Typhoon Leader. We're Winchester. Out of rockets. Returning to base. Copy that, Typhoon Leader. Nice work. VCP out. As they turn for home, Gray looks back at the wood. 3 columns of black smoke rise into the summer sky. Down there, German tank crews are burning. Or running. Or dying. He thinks about the photograph in his cockpit. His wife's smile. Their small house in Essex. The garden she tends. He thinks about what they're doing here in these troubled aircraft, dropping high explosives on men who probably have photographs tucked in their own pockets. Then he pushes the thoughts away and focuses on flying. There will be another mission in 3 hours. July 13, 1944. Vore, 15 p.m. Above Verneuil, France. Pilot Officer Johnny Baldwin leads his section of 4 Typhoons home from a successful strike on German rail yards. Vore, flying at 8,000 feet, fuel gauges showing enough to make it back to base with a comfortable margin. Behind them, the rail yards are burning. Leader, this is 3. One of his pilots calls. Multiple contacts. 6 o'clock high. Baldwin looks back and up. His blood turns to ice. 30 Messerschmitt 109s are diving on them. 30. Break. 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 Baldwin screams. Everyone for himself. The neat formation explodes. 4 Typhoons scatter in 4 different directions. A Me-109 flashes past Baldwin's nose so close he can see the pilot's face. He yanks the stick hard left, then right, trying to shake another 109 off his tail. The Typhoon responds sluggishly. It's a ground attack aircraft, heavy and powerful, not a dogfighter. But it's also fast. Baldwin pushes the throttle to the firewall and dives. The Typhoon accelerates like a falling anvil. The airspeed indicator climbs past 400 miles per hour, 420, 440. The Me-109 can't keep up. Baldwin pulls up hard, scanning for his section. He sees one Typhoon twisting and turning 2 109s on its tail. Another Typhoon is diving for the deck with a whole swarm chasing it. The radio is chaos. Shouts. Curses. Position calls overlapping. Then Squadron Leader Wally Aaron's voice cuts through. All Typhoons make for the deck. Don't try to fight. Get low and get fast. Baldwin doesn't need to be told twice. He points the nose down and runs. The Typhoon's thick wings and powerful engine make it one of the fastest aircraft at low altitude. The 109s are lighter, more maneuverable, but they can't catch a Typhoon in a straight race at 400 miles per hour. Baldwin roars across the French countryside at 500 feet, hedgerows and farmhouses blurring past. Behind him, the 109s fall away. Finally, his base appears ahead. Baldwin lands, his hands shaking on the controls. 3 other Typhoons are already on the ground. One is smoking, multiple cannon strikes stitched across its wings. They wait. 10 minutes pass. 15. The 4th Typhoon doesn't come home. That evening in the makeshift operations tent, the pilots gather for debriefing. 3109's Aaron says, his voice flat. Maybe more. That's the largest formation we've seen since D-Day. They're getting bolder, someone mutters. Or more desperate, another pilot responds. Aaron's lights a cigarette. The Luftwaffe hasn't given up. They're husbanding their strength, waiting for moments when they can hit us hard. We got lucky today. Only 1 aircraft lost. Lucky? The word comes from the pilot whose Typhoon took the cannon hits. Roberts is dead, and we're lucky? Silence. Aaron stubs out his cigarette. Yes. Lucky. Because 3109s should have killed all 4 of us. The fact that they only got 1 means they're not as good as they used to be. Or we're getting better. He stands. New orders from Group. Starting tomorrow, all Typhoon missions will have top cover. The Americans will provide P-47s to keep the Luftwaffe off our backs. Our job is to hit the ground targets. Their job is to keep us alive while we do it. It's the beginning of a new phase. The Americans will own the high sky. The Typhoons will own the ground. And the Germans will learn to fear both. August 7, 1944. 5A00. 1944. Petsam 0 wards. German lines near Mortain, France. Hauptmann Dieter Fischer watches the pre-dawn mist from the hatch of his Panther tank. Around him in the darkness, 260 tanks and armored vehicles prepare to move. Operation Lüttich. Hitler's personal order. The last great counterattack in the West. The plan is audacious. Drive west to the coast at Avranches. Cut off Patton's Third Army. Destroy the Americans will be trapped and destroyed. The Normandy invasion will fail. If it fails, the Wehrmacht in France is finished. Fischer climbs into his tank. Around him, engines rumble to life. The mist begins to glow as the eastern sky lightens. At 5:30 a.m. the attack begins. The German column surges forward. For the first few hours, everything goes according to plan. American positions are overrun. Road junctions captured. The advance penetrates 5 miles, 6 miles, approaching the key town of Mortain. Fischer's radio crackles with reports. Positions taken. Casualties light. Resistance collapsing. Then at 11 a.m. the sun burns through the morning mist. And the Typhoons come. 11:15 a.m. Airfield B.5. France. Squadron leader Frank Jensen stands in front of his 174 squadron pilots, pointing to the map. The Germans have launched a major counterattack. Hundreds of tanks driving west toward Mortain. The Americans are holding, but they need help. Our help. He taps the map. Intelligence reports a column stretching from St. Barthélemy to Charentes. That's miles of armor sitting on one road in broad daylight. The pilots exchange glances. In broad daylight. The Germans never move armor in daylight. Not since D-Day established Allied air superiority. Very desperate, Jensen continues. Which makes them vulnerable. This is what we've trained for, gentlemen. This is why we're here. He looks at each pilot in turn. We're going to destroy that column. All of it. 174 and 181 squadrons together. 8 aircraft per squadron. Maximum rocket load. The Americans will provide top cover. No Luftwaffe interference. What about flak? Someone asks. Expect it. But the intelligence says it's disorganized. They weren't expecting to operate in daylight either. Jensen folds the map. The strategy is simple. First wave hits the front of the column. Second wave hits the back. Everything in between is trapped. Then we shuttle back and forth until there's nothing left to hit. It's a tactic that will become famous. Cork the bottle. Questions. No one speaks. Then let's go kill some tanks. 12:30 p.m. 8,000 feet above St. Barthélemy. Flight Lieutenant Bob Gray leads his section of 100 and taps that they haven't even tried to disperse. My God, someone whispers on the radio. There must be hundreds of them. All aircraft, this is Leader Jensen's voice, cuts in. I have the target. Sections 1 and 2. You take the front of the column. 3 and 4 hit the rear. Fire on my mark. Gray watches as the first Typhoons roll into their dives. One by one they plunge toward the German column, rockets firing, pulling up in steep climbs that must be pulling 5 or 6 Gs. Explosions ripple along the road. A Panther tank brews up its ammunition, cooking off in a spectacular secondary explosion. A half-track disintegrates under a direct hit. A fuel truck erupts in a fireball that climbs 500 feet into the air. Section 3. You're cleared in Jensen orders. Gray rolls inverted and pulls through. The dive is terrifyingly steep. The road rushes up at him. He can see individual vehicles now. Individual soldiers running for cover. The detail is horrifying and mesmerizing. His targeting reticle settles on a cluster of tanks. Fire. 8 rockets streak away. Gray pulls back on the stick with both hands. The G-force crushes him into his seat. His vision goes gray, then black. When it clears, Hes climbing through 5,000 feet. Behind him, the German column is dying. On the ground, Hauptmann Fischer experiences hell. The first he knows of the attack is the sound. That distinctive roar of Napier Sabre engines. A sound every German soldier in France has learned to fear. Jabos. Someone screams. Take cover. Fischer looks up through his commander's hatch. 4 aircraft are diving nearly vertically toward his position. British Typhoons. The sound of the rockets firing is unlike anything Hes ever heard. A massive tearing noise like the sky ripping open. Then the impacts. The tank in front of Fischer's Panther explodes. A rocket has penetrated its thinner top armor. The turret lifts off as the ammunition detonates, flipping end over end before crashing back to Earth 50 meters away. Another rocket hits the road directly in front of Fischer. The explosion throws earth and debris over his tank. Shrapnel rings against the armor. Reverse! Fischer shouts to his driver. Get us off the road! But there's nowhere to go. Behind them, more tanks. Ahead, the burning wreckage of the vehicles that were leading the column. On both sides, ditches and hedgerows that would trap a tank trying to cross them. There he's stuck. Fischer sees the second wave of Typhoons beginning their dives. Everyone out, he screams. Abandon the tank. His crew doesn't need to be told twice. They bail out, running for the hedgerows as the Typhoons attack again. Fischer dives into a ditch and presses himself against the earth. The ground shakes with each impact. Dirt rains down on him. Something, a piece of a vehicle, a rock he can't tell, whizzes past his head close enough that he feels the wind of its passage. He risks a glance back at his tank. It's still intact, but the tank behind it is burning. The one ahead is on its side, blown off the road by a rocket impact. The entire column, 260 vehicles, is trapped on this single road, being torn apart from the air. And the Typhoons keep coming. The battle rages for 8.5 hours. 294 Typhoon sorties. Wave after wave. As one squadron returns to base to rearm and refuel, another arrives to continue the attack. Ground crews work frantically loading rockets and ammunition, refueling aircraft in 15 minutes or less, getting them back in the air. 2088 rockets are fired. 80 tons of bombs. Tens of thousands of 20mm cannon rounds. Above the battle, American P-47 Thunderbolts fly protective circles. Twice formations of Luftwaffe fighters try to intervene. Both times the Americans drive them off. Not a single Typhoon is lost to enemy aircraft. The flak that intelligence predicted would be disorganized is actually quite heavy. But the Typhoon's attack pattern, steep dives from 8,000 feet, firing at 4,000 feet, pulling up immediately, gives the German gunners only seconds to track and fire. It's not enough. By 8 p.m., when darkness finally ends the attack, the German counteroffensive is over. Von Kluge's last gamble has failed. The 57th Panzer Corps, or what's left of it, retreats. The American breakout continues, and in headquarters across France, German commanders begin to realize a new truth. Daylight movement is death. August 7, 1944. 10:00 181 squadrons gather in the operations tent for debriefing. Very exhausted. Some flew 4 sorties today. Some 5. Frank Jensen stands before them, his flight suit dark with sweat, despite the evening coolness. Preliminary reports from the army, he says. The German attack is broken. They're retreating. Mortain is secure. Tired cheers. Intelligence estimates we destroyed at least 80 tanks today. Maybe more. We won't know the exact count until our forces occupy the area. What Jensen doesn't say, what no one will know until after the war, is that the number is both inflated and irrelevant. Post-battle examination will show that rockets destroyed 7 tanks, bombs got 2 more, cannon fire and other weapons accounted for the rest. But hundreds of German tank crews abandoned their vehicles. Hundreds more wouldn't emerge from cover for hours after the last Typhoon left. The psychological impact of the attack, the terror of being trapped on an open road while aircraft dive out of the sky again and again, broke the attack more effectively than the actual destruction. The Germans call the Typhoons the Typhoons' terror. They're not wrong. We lost 2 aircraft today, Jensen continues. Both to flak. Rogers and Williams. Rogers bailed out and is already back with our lines. Williams. He pauses. Williams when the tent is quiet. Tomorrow, we go again. Jensen says. The Germans are retreating, but they're not beaten. Not yet. He dismisses them. Outside, beneath a sky still glowing faintly with the fires of burning vehicles, the pilots walk to their tents. Some talk quietly. Others walk in silence. Flight Lieutenant Gray sits on his cot, staring at the photograph of his wife. His hands are steady now, but during the debriefing, they shook so badly he had to clasp them together. 4 sorties. 32 rockets fired. Countless cannon rounds. He can still see the German soldiers running, diving for cover, some of them not making it. He thinks about the tank commander he saw bail out during his 3rd attack, a man probably his own age, scrambling from the hatch as Gray's rockets streaked toward him. Gray doesn't know if the man survived. He's not sure he wants to know. Gray lies back on his cot, still wearing his flight suit. In 6 hours they'll wake him for the dawn patrol. Outside, a Typhoon's engine coughs to life as ground crews work through the night, preparing for tomorrow. The war continues. August 18, 1944. 2000 and 2 and Siamik, 1944. 2 000. Below him stretches what will become known as the Falaise Gap, or more accurately, the Falaise Pocket. The killing ground. After Mortain, the Allies closed a trap around the German 7th Army. British and Canadian forces pushed south from Caen. Americans drove north from Le Mans. The Germans, too slow to retreat, found themselves surrounded in a narrowing pocket near the town of Falaise. RAF Bomber Command flattened Falaise itself, making the town impassable. Now, thousands of German vehicles are trying to escape through a shrinking gap near the village of Chambois, and the Typhoons are waiting. The scene below is apocalyptic. Every road is jammed with vehicles. Tanks, trucks, half-tracks, horse-drawn wagons, artillery pieces, ambulances, staff cars, all trying to funnel through the narrow lanes of the Normandy bocage. When one vehicle is hit, everything behind it stops. The whole road becomes a stationary target. Ambrose can see abandoned vehicles everywhere, some burning, some simply left in place. Their crews fled into the surrounding woods and fields. The roads themselves are crater-pocked from previous attacks, forcing drivers to navigate around bomb holes only to find themselves trapped when the next wave arrives. This is 175 Squadron Leader, his CO's voice crackles over the radio. Target is the column at Vimoutiers. All sections prepare for. Christ, there's thousands of them. Even veteran pilots are stunned by what they're seeing. The column stretches for miles, packed so tightly that individual vehicles are indistinguishable from above, just a solid mass of metal and canvas trying desperately to escape. Sections 1 and 2 hit the front of the column. 3 and 4 take the rear. Let's cork this bottle. Ambrose rolls into his attack dive. The flak is immediate and intense. Unlike Mortain, where the Germans were caught by surprise, the Wehrmacht at Falaise knows the Typhoons are coming. Every vehicle that has a gun, anti-aircraft guns, tanks, even rifles, fires upward. The sky fills with tracer rounds, forming curtains of light that the Typhoons must fly through. Ambrose's Typhoon shudders as flak bursts bracket him. Something pings against the fuselage. Shrapnel, but not a critical hit. His targeting reticle settles on a cluster of vehicles. Fire. 8 rockets away. Pull up. Hard. The G-force is crushing. Ambrose's vision tunnels. For a moment, everything goes gray. When it clears, Hez climbing through his own rocket smoke. Behind him, explosions bloom across the column. But the flak is worse now. Orange bursts, black puffs. The Germans know the Typhoon's attack pattern. Steep dive fire at 4,000 feet, pull up. They're putting up walls of fire at exactly that altitude. Leader, this is 6. A panicked voice. Im hit. Im hit. Ambrose looks left. A Typhoon is streaming white smoke. Coolant. The Sabre engine is done. The pilot will have maybe 30 seconds before it seizes completely. 6. Get out of here. Make for our lines. The damaged Typhoon turns west, trailing smoke like a banner. Ambrose doesn't see what happens next. Hez already diving for his second attack. On the ground, the German 7th Army is dying. Oberleutnant Fischer, who survived Mortain by abandoning his tank, is on foot now, part of a column of soldiers trying to escape the encirclement. His Panther is somewhere behind him, left burning on a road near Argentan. Around him, chaos. Vehicles abandoned when their fuel ran out. Wounded soldiers stumbling along the roads. Officers trying to maintain some semblance of order and discipline. And everywhere the sound of aircraft engines. Fischer has developed what he calls Typhoon hearing. He can distinguish the Sabre engine's roar from all other aircraft. P-47s have a different sound, deeper, more rhythmic. Spitfires sing at a higher pitch. But the Typhoon's sound is unmistakable. And he hears it now. Jabos. The cry goes up and down the column. Fischer doesn't run for cover anymore. There is no cover. The hedgerows are already packed with soldiers from previous attacks. The ditches are full. The woods are burning. Instead, he drops flat on the road and presses his face into the dirt. The scream of diving aircraft grows louder. Then the distinctive ripping sound of rockets firing. Then impacts. Massive concussive explosions that lift Fisher off the ground and slam him back down. A horse-drawn supply wagon 20 meters ahead takes a direct hit. The explosion is horrific. Wood-metal supplies and the horses themselves transformed into shrapnel. When the smoke clears, nothing remains but a crater and scattered debris. Fisher lies still waiting. The Typhoons make their attack runs and climb away. The sound of their engines fades. For perhaps 10 seconds, there's relative quiet. Then the sound comes again. Another squadron arriving. The shuttle service continues. This is the third attack Fisher has survived today. Hes starting to wonder if surviving is really better than the alternative. August 18, 1944, 5:30 p.m. Airfield B.6 France. Wing Commander Charles Green's 8-4 Squadron lands after their 4th sortie of the day. Green climbs out of his Typhoon and immediately begins planning the next mission. "Sir, the ground crews need more time," his flight sergeant says. "We're running low on rockets. The supply trucks are..." "How long?" Green interrupts. 90 minutes. Maybe 2 hours. Green checks his watch. That leaves perhaps 3 hours of daylight. Time for one more attack. Maybe 2 if they're quick. "Get me everything you can. I want maximum loads. This is the chance we've been waiting for. The entire German 7th Army trapped in the open. We're not stopping until it's dark." The flight sergeant salutes and runs off. Green walks to the operations tent where the latest intelligence photos are spread across a table. The images show the carnage at Falaise, vehicles abandoned, roads blocked, fires burning. "They're breaking," the intelligence officer says, pointing to the photos. "The pocket is collapsing. Some units are getting through the gap at Chambois, but not many. Most of them are trapped." Green studies the photos. Has been flying combat missions since 1940. Has seen the Blitz, the Battle of Britain, the Malta convoys, the invasion of Sicily. Has watched cities burn and ships sink. But has never seen anything like this. "How many more squadrons are hitting them?" he asks. Below him, the English Channel glints in the evening sun. 15 miles to friendly territory. Maybe 20. The engine temperature continues to climb. Hall does the math in his head. At his current speed and rate of descent, Hell crossed the front line with maybe 2,000 feet of altitude. Maybe. The engine begins to make a grinding sound. Not good. 10 miles to the lines. The temperature gauge is pegged at maximum. Any second now the engine will seize. 5 miles. The grinding becomes a shriek. White smoke pours from the cowling. 2 miles. Hall can see Allied positions below. Tanks, trucks, artillery emplacements all marked with recognition panels so the Typhoons don't attack them. The engine seizes with a final metallic scream. The propeller stops turning. Sudden silence except for the wind noise. Hall is gliding, now trading altitude for distance. 1,000 feet, 800 feet, 600. He crosses the front line at 400 feet, still gliding. Ahead, a field. Recently plowed. Not ideal, but it'll have to do. Gear up. Hes doing a belly landing. Visown. Trim the aircraft for minimum speed. The field rushes up. Hall pulls back on the stick, flaring the Typhoon to bleed off speed. The impact is harder than he expected. The Typhoon's belly hits the plowed earth, and the aircraft slides, throwing up rooster tails of dirt. Metal screams. Something tears away from the underside. The Typhoon slides for what feels like forever. Then stops. Hall sits in the cockpit, his heart hammering. Hes alive. Hes in friendly territory. Hes alive. He pops the canopy and climbs out onto the wing. British soldiers are already running toward him from a nearby hedgerow. "You all right, mate?" one of them shouts. Hall looks back at his Typhoon. The belly is torn to shreds. The propeller is bent. The engine is destroyed. But the cockpit is intact. "Yeah," he says, his voice shaking. "I'm all right. We say having a sow now, before's from ears as we highs in. Behind high sound of now, teals on halve, some of there. Veers as we, jies on, the evening wind. Mound fang, to say, there, veers on halve, veer, the voice, his size, Mikey 19. There's one of the lucky ones." He walked away. August 19, 1944, 8:00. The attacks continue. Last now night. Share, Yore. Last now, 11 more pilots killed or captured. But by late afternoon on August 19, the Falaise gap is closed. The few German units that escaped are scattered and disorganized. The vast majority of the 7th Army is gone, killed, wounded, or captured. The Allies will count thousands of destroyed vehicles, hundreds of tanks, countless artillery pieces. Post-war analysis will show that Typhoon rockets destroyed 14 tanks. Bombs got 4 more. Cannon fire accounted for 21 light armored vehicles. These numbers seem small compared to the claims made in the heat of battle. But the analysis misses the point. Hundreds of tanks were abandoned by crews too terrified to stay in them. Thousands of vehicles were left behind when their drivers fled into the woods. The German 7th armies that once conquered France, threatened England, nearly destroyed the Soviet Union. Now they're running, and the Typhoons are chasing them. Leader, this is 3. I have vehicles 12 o'clock, approximately 2 miles. Gray looks ahead. There, a column of trucks and half-tracks moving east at high speed. I see them, sections prepare to attack. We hit them low and fast. Watch for flak. The Typhoons descend to 500 feet, racing across the Belgian countryside. The Germans below see them coming. Gray can see vehicles swerving, pulling off the road, soldiers jumping out and running for cover. Too late. Gray opens fire with his cannons. 4 20mm Hispano cannons, each firing at 600 rounds per minute. The effect on unarmored vehicles is devastating. The lead truck explodes. The one behind it crashes into the wreckage. A half-track tries to turn off the road and tips over into a ditch. Gray's wingman follows, cannons hammering. More vehicles burning. The 4 Typhoons make one pass and climb away. Gray looks back. The entire column is stopped, vehicles burning or abandoned, soldiers scattered across the fields. Reform and continue patrol, Gray orders. This is the new reality of the air war in Western Europe. The Luftwaffe barely contests the skies anymore. Fuel shortages, pilot losses, the concentration of forces on the Eastern Front. All of it means that German fighters are rare. The Typhoons own the battlefield. September 1944 has been a month of rapid advance. After breaking out of Normandy, the Allied armies raced across France. Paris liberated. The Seine crossed. German forces in full retreat. The Typhoon squadrons moved forward to keep pace, operating from hastily prepared airfields in France, then Belgium. The mission remained constant: find German forces and destroy them. Armed reconnaissance, armed recce and pilot slang became the primary mission. Sections of 4 aircraft would patrol assigned areas looking for targets of opportunity. Anything that moved. Anything that looked military. Trucks. Trains. Barges on canals. Staff cars. Supply depots. Command posts. all vulnerable to the caress of the Typhoons. The tactics evolved. Flying at 7,000 feet just below the cloud layer, Typhoons would orbit their patrol area. When someone spotted a target, the section would dive attack and climb back to altitude. Four-ship formations became standard. 2 pairs with the second pair stepped up and positioned down-sun for mutual defense. Attack runs were quick and brutal. Dive from 7,000 feet to 3,000 feet. Fire rockets or cannons. Pull up immediately. Don't linger. Flak remains deadly. The fragmentation rockets proved particularly effective against soft-skinned vehicles. Each rocket would explode into thousands of fragments, shredding canvas, puncturing fuel tanks, killing exposed personnel. Those fragmentation rockets cut things to ribbons, Gray would later recall. Really lethal things. September 20, 1944. Airfield B-78, Eindhoven, Holland. The advance has brought new challenges. 124 and 143. Wing Typhoons are now based at Eindhoven, well inside Holland. They're flying longer missions, penetrating deeper into German-held territory, and the Germans are adapting. Flight Lieutenant David Evans briefs his section for a deep penetration mission. An armed recce around Osnabrück, more than 100 miles inside Germany. Will carry long-range tanks, Evans says, pointing to the 45-gallon drop tanks that extend the Typhoon's range. Fly outbound on tank fuel, then jettison them and switch to internal tanks for the return. That gives us about 90 minutes over enemy territory. What about fighters? Someone asks. Intelligence says the Luftwaffe is concentrating on defending the homeland from bomber raids. They're not expecting Typhoons this deep. But stay alert. If we encounter fighters, we don't dogfight. We run. The mission is reconnaissance and interdiction, not air combat. The 4 Typhoons take off at 2 Warn, varying force, for Sunting Atha. The 4 ships, Wehrmacht Saar, and Vase, Deplore. Each Tenkeluk, Piktikaluk. The Typhoons descend, circling the train. It's a freight train. Maybe 40 cars long, moving at moderate speed. Could be military supplies, Evans says. We're hitting it. Same drill. It'll take the engine, rest of you work back from there. Evans rolls into a dive. The train crew sees them coming. The locomotive's whistle screams. A warning to passengers or a cry of despair, Evans can't tell. He fires his cannons. The 20mm rounds stitch along the locomotive, punching through the boiler. Steam erupts in a massive white plume. The train lurches, brakes squealing. Evans pulls up and watches his wingmen attack. Cannon fire rips into the freight cars. One explodes. Ammunition or fuel inside. Another catches fire. By the time the 4th Typhoon completes its attack, the train is stopped burning, destroyed. Good shooting, Evans says. Let's find more. Bandits. High. 6 o'clock. Evans looks back and up. His blood runs cold. 40 or 50 German fighters, Me-109s and Fib-190s, are diving on them. Break. Everyone break. The neat formation dissolves. 4 Typhoons scatter, each pilot fighting for his life. Evans shoves his throttle forward and dives for the deck. The Typhoon accelerates like a brick falling down a well. 304 toots. Evans sound ticks. Walking Dilden. The sigh of force. Bashking. Bashking the light suffering. Walking die, and deeps in year. And filling for a deal. Poor in year. Walking tie suffering. Walking tie suffering. Lice. And filling situs poor in dew. And Gimra. Birking tie suffering. Evans sighs suffering. For Evans suffering. Riching. Tortsing. Tortsen year. Assergers. Evans soft. Bash. Waseras. Walking tie suffering. 2. Walking Tai. For adieu. Angimara. Fortin sign. The Thai suffering. For adieu. The Typhoons find each other. And reform. Everyone okay? Evan. Behind them the German fighters don't pursue. The Luftwaffe has learned, don't chase Typhoons at low altitude. You'll never catch them. 6 p.m. Airfield B-78, Eindhoven. All 4 Typhoons land safely. 2's aircraft has cannon strikes in the tail section and 1 elevator, but nothing critical. 40 fighters, someone says during debriefing. Maybe 50. Where the hell did they all come from? They're husbanding their strength, the intelligence officer explains. Concentrating on defending key areas. If you penetrate deep enough, they'll respond in force. So what do we do? Evans asks. Stay unpredictable. Vary your routes. Vary your altitudes. Don't give them time to organize a response. It's the beginning of a new phase. The easy days, if they were ever easy, are over. The Germans are learning, adapting. But so are the Typhoons. October 1944. The war grinds on. By autumn, the rapid advance has stalled. The Allied supply lines are stretched to breaking. Fuel shortages limit operations. The weather deteriorates. And the Germans are fighting harder now, defending their homeland with desperate ferocity. For the Typhoon squadrons, this means higher losses and more difficult missions. The statistics are brutal. Over 60 Typhoons lost in June. Nearly 60 more in July. 90 lost in August during the Falaise battles. Another 108 between September and November. More than 300 aircraft in 6 months. Each one represents a pilot killed, wounded, or captured. October 11, 1944. Airfield B. Atty, Volkel, Holland. Squadron leader Ian Waddy led 164 Squadron for exactly 9 days before he was shot down. Waddy, a farmer from New Zealand, had been a flight commander in 486 Squadron before taking command of 164 in early August. He was experienced, skilled, respected by his men. On this day, he led an attack on German tanks and trucks near the front line. The flak was intense, a curtain of fire that the Typhoons had to fly through to reach their targets. Waddy's Typhoon was hit. Cannon fire or flak, his wingmen couldn't tell, but the aircraft began trailing smoke immediately. Im hit, Waddy called calmly over the radio. Engines gone. Im bailing out. They watched him go. Canopy jettisoned, Waddy climbing out onto the wing, jumping clear. His parachute deployed, and he drifted down behind German lines. 2 of his pilots tried to follow to see where he landed. Both were shot down. Waddy survived and became a prisoner of war. He was one of the lucky ones. Many weren't. November 12, 1944. Somewhere over Holland. Flight Lieutenant R.G. Merritt and his brother Pilot Officer W.K. Merritt flew together in 18-1 Squadron. Brothers in the same squadron was unusual. The RAF generally tried to separate family members to avoid losing multiple sons from one family. But the Merritt brothers had insisted, and somehow they'd both ended up in 181. On this day they were flying an armed weather reconnaissance over the Zuiderzee when they spotted a train west of Utrecht. "Let's take it," R.G. Merritt said. They attacked through intense flak. R.G. Merritt's Typhoon was hit almost immediately. "I've had my time," he called to his brother. "Been hit. Going down." W.K. Merritt circled, watching his brother's Typhoon descend. He didn't see a parachute. He didn't see a crash. The aircraft simply disappeared below the cloud layer. W.K. Merritt returned to base alone. His brother was never found. 3 months later, W.K. Merritt was shot down and bailed out, fracturing his arm. He survived. But for the rest of his life, he would wonder what happened to his brother in those final moments over Holland. December 16, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Hitler's last gamble in the West begins. Operation W.K. Merritt was shot down and bailed out, fracturing his arm. He survived. But for the rest of his life, he would wonder what happened to his brother in those final moments over Holland. December 16, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Hitler's last gamble in the West begins. Operation W in Dalish. The plan is audacious: break through to Antwerp, split the Allied forces, force a For 7 days, terrible weather grounds the Allied air forces. The Germans advance under cover of snow fog and low clouds. The Americans fight desperately, giving ground, slowly bleeding the German attack. Then, on December 23rd, the weather clears. And the Typhoons return. Squadron leader Geoffrey Gray leads his 182 Squadron against German armor near Bastogne. The scene below is chaos. Burning vehicles, artillery fire, American positions marked with recognition panels, German positions firing everything they have. There, Gray's wingman calls. Tanks in that pass. Gray sees them, a column of panzers trapped in a narrow valley, unable to maneuver, perfect targets. Kit, take your section and block the north end of the pass. Ill, take the south end. Trap them. The tactic works perfectly. Gray's section hits the rear of the column with rockets. Kit's section hits the front. Everything in between is trapped. The Typhoons shuttle back and forth, attacking again and again. By the time they're Winchester, out of ammunition, the pass is littered with burning tanks and abandoned vehicles. Bloody, incredible party, Gray will later say. But there's a cost. During the battle, Wing Commander Charles Green goes missing. Green, the brilliant tactician who spotted the opportunity at Falaise, who led 184 Squadron to devastating effect, simply doesn't come home from a mission. No one saw him go down. No one knows what happened. Hess just gone. The war takes the best along with the rest. December 24, 25, 1944. The Typhoons hit the German offensive around the clock. Whenever weather permits, they're in the air. Hunting tanks, destroying supply columns, attacking headquarters. 10 Typhoons are shot down in air-to-air combat in December. 37 more fall to flak and other causes. But the German offensive stalls. Runs out of fuel. Runs out of New Year's Day dawns clear and cold. The Typhoon squadrons based at Eindhoven are preparing for the day's first missions when someone shouts a warning. Aircraft, incoming, lots of them. Every pilot and ground crew member looks up. The sky is full of German fighters. Fepu-190s and Me-109s. Dozens of them, maybe more than 100, scream across the airfield at low altitude. Their guns are already firing. Operation Bodenplatte. The Luftwaffe's last coordinated offensive, a desperate gamble to cripple Allied air power by attacking airfields across Holland, Belgium, and France. 17 Allied airfields are being hit simultaneously. Eindhoven is one of them. The attack is devastating. Cannon fire rips across the airfield. Parked Typhoons explode. Fuel trucks erupt in fireballs. The metal matting of the runway is torn to shreds. Some Typhoon pilots are in their cockpits preparing to take off. They try to get airborne, to fight back or escape, but most are shot down before they can clear the runway. Pilot Officer Derek Tapson watches from a slit trench as the German fighters make pass after pass. His Typhoon, the one he was about to fly, takes multiple cannon hits and catches fire. 20 Typhoons are destroyed. 14 more are damaged so badly they're written off. 440 Squadron is left with exactly 4 serviceable aircraft. But the Germans pay a price. Some of the Typhoons do get airborne. 439 Squadron manages to scramble 4 aircraft. In the dogfight that follows, they shoot down 4 Fepu-190s. More importantly, the Luftwaffe loses experienced pilots it can't replace. The mission succeeds tactically. Hundreds of Allied aircraft are destroyed. But strategically, it's a disaster. The Luftwaffe has expended its remaining strength on a single throw of the dice. After Bodenplatte, it will never again mount a major offensive. The Allies, meanwhile, simply bring in replacement aircraft. Within a week, every Typhoon squadron is back to full strength. Gloucester Aircraft's production line has been delivering new Typhoons throughout the war. The supply seems endless. January 5, 1945. Flight Lieutenant Derek Tapson flies to England in a transport plane and returns the next day, flying a brand new Typhoon. Around him, other pilots do the same, ferrying replacement aircraft from England to the continent. The Luftwaffe destroyed 20 Typhoons at Eindhoven. Within 72 hours, all 20 are replaced. The war continues. February 10, 1945. Above Germany. Flight Lieutenant Derek Tapson leads his section on a deep penetration mission. There he hunting supply trains near the Rhine, trying to prevent German reinforcements from reaching the front. The mission goes wrong almost immediately. Flak hits Tapson's Typhoon during the attack run. The engine temperature spikes. Coolant streams from the cowling. Hit Tapson calls. Engines overheating. Trying to make it to the Rhine, he coaxes the dying Typhoon west toward Allied lines. The engine is making terrible grinding sounds. Any moment it will seize. He doesn't make it. The engine fails over Wessel. Tapson crash lands on gravel isle just north of the city. He climbs out of his wrecked Typhoon and raises his hands. German paratroopers are already running toward him. Tapson becomes a prisoner of war, has one of more than 500 Typhoon pilots killed or captured during the war. The statistics tell part of the story. More than 500 Typhoons lost on operations, more than 223 combat sorties before being shot down. Like Ian Waddy, who commanded a squadron for 9 days before becoming a POW. Like R.G. Merritt, who disappeared over Holland and was never found. Like the 17 pilots killed in a single day at Falaise. Like all the others whose names are recorded in squadron diaries and on memorial walls. The Germans never forgot the Typhoons. In post-war interviews, Wehrmacht veterans spoke of the terror of hearing that distinctive Napier Sabre sound, of diving into ditches and praying the rockets would miss, of abandoning perfectly functional tanks because staying in them meant certain death. The Jabos destroyed our will to fight, one tank commander said. We could handle artillery, we could handle infantry, but the Typhoons, there was no defense against the Typhoons. The psychological impact was immeasurable. At Mortain, German tank crews abandoned hundreds of vehicles not because they were destroyed, but because they were terrified. At Falaise, the smell of death could be detected at 6,000 feet, a testament to the carnage below. During the retreat across France, German forces learned to move only at night. Daylight movement was suicide. The Typhoon's reputation grew into myth. Rockets that could destroy tanks with pinpoint accuracy. Pilots who never missed. An aircraft that ruled the battlefield absolutely. The reality was more complex. Post-war analysis showed that rockets were less accurate than claimed. At Mortain, only 7 tanks were actually destroyed by rocket fire out of 84 claimed. At Falaise, 14 tanks. But the analysis missed the point. The Typhoon's real weapon wasn't the rocket. It was terror. The sound of the Sabre engine screaming down in a dive. The sight of 8 rockets streaking toward your position. The knowledge that nowhere was safe, that any moment could be your last. That broke armies more effectively than any number of destroyed tanks. By February 1946, the last Typhoon was retired from service. The aircraft that had been rushed into service with a troubled engine and fatal structural flaws had become, for a brief moment, one of the most feared weapons in the Allied arsenal. Its moment in history, from D-Day to the German surrender, lasted less than a year. But in that year it helped break the Wehrmacht's will to fight. It enabled the Allied breakout from Normandy. It chased the German army across France, Belgium, and Holland. It shortened the war. The Luftwaffe pilots who ruled French skies for 4 years learned a terrible lesson. Air superiority is fragile. Once lost, it's nearly impossible to regain. And when you're on the receiving end, when the aircraft diving out of the sun are hunting you, there is no glory in war. Only survival. And sometimes not even that. May 8, 1945. VE Day. Airfield B-100, Goch, Germany. The war in Europe is over. Flight Lieutenant David Evans stands beside his Typhoon watching as ground crews paint white victory stripes on the fuselage. Around him, pilots celebrate, shouting, laughing, opening bottles of champagne that someone scrounged from a liberated German supply depot. Evans doesn't join them. Not yet. He's thinking about the men who aren't here. The empty beds in the barracks. The names crossed off the squadron roster. Roberts. Williams. The Merritt brother who never came home. Squadron leader Collins, whose parachute failed over Normandy. Wing Commander Green, who simply vanished over the Ardennes. And all the others. Evans flew 47 combat missions in his Typhoon. 47 times he climbed into that cramped cockpit, fired up that temperamental Sabre engine, and flew into flak and fighters and everything Germany could throw at him. 47 times he came home. He was lucky. He knows this. "Sir." One of the ground crew approaches. "We're taking her up for one last flight. Sort of a victory lap. Would you like to do the honors?" Evans looks at his Typhoon. The thick wings scarred by shrapnel. The fuselage patched in a dozen places. The propeller blade notched where a rock kicked up during a rough landing. The engine that's been rebuilt twice, and still sounds like it's about to explode. She's a beast. Temperamental. Dangerous even when nothing's shooting at you. But she's also the reason he survived. "Yeah," Evans says. "Let's fly." He performs his pre-flight checks one more time. Strap in. Oxygen check. Controls check. The photograph. Not his wife this time, but a picture of his entire squadron taken 3 months ago. Half the men in that photo are dead or missing. He tucks it into the instrument panel. "Clear," he shouts. The Kaufman starter fires. The Sabre catches Kauf's roars to life. Flames shoot back from the exhausts. The whole aircraft vibrates with barely contained power. Evans taxis to the runway, fighting the torque as always, zigzagging to see around the massive nose. Tower clears him for takeoff. Full throttle. The familiar struggle with right rudder. The acceleration. The moment when the tail lifts, and suddenly he can see ahead. Liftoff. Gear up. The Typhoon climbs strong and steady despite her scars. Evans flies east over Germany. Below him the landscape is transformed. Destroyed bridges. Burned out tanks still littering the roadsides. Towns reduced to rubble. The physical evidence of 5 years of total war. He flies over what was once a German panzer assembly area. Now just a field of abandoned vehicles, some destroyed, most simply left in place when their crews surrendered. He flies over Falaise. From the air 2 months later, you can still see the ghostly outlines of the carnage. Darker patches where vehicles burned. Disturbed earth, where craters were filled in. The roads still stained. He thinks about the German tank commander he saw bail out during that third attack in August. The man scrambling from his hatch as Evans' rockets streaked toward him. Did he survive? Did he make it home to his family? Evans will never know. He turns north toward Holland, then west toward Belgium. Below him in every town people are celebrating. Liberation. Victory. The end of the nightmare. The Typhoon that helped make this possible flies over them. Unnoticed, unremarked, just another aircraft in a sky that has seen so many. Evans doesn't mind. The Typhoon was never about glory. It was about the mission. Get in, hit hard, get out. Simple, brutal, effective. He turns back toward Gauche, lining up for landing. Gear down, flaps down, reduce power. The Typhoon settles onto the runway with the same heavy thump it always has. Evans taxis back to dispersal and shuts down the engine. The Sabre gives one final cough, then silence. He sits in the cockpit for a moment, his hands resting on the control column. This is probably his last flight in a Typhoon. The war is over. The aircraft will be retired soon, obsolete in a world of jet engines and guided missiles. But for 1 year, one crucial year, the Typhoon ruled the battlefield and changed the course of the war. June 1945, RAF Station, England. The Typhoons are being withdrawn from service. Some are broken up for scrap. Others are relegated to training units or stored in hangars awaiting a decision on their fate. The pilots are being reassigned. Some stay in the RAF. Others return to civilian life, trying to readjust to a world at peace. Derek Tapson, liberated from the POW camp in April, is told he can't fly anymore. Jaundice contracted in captivity. Medical discharge. His logbook is taken away, his combat record filed and forgotten. He doesn't argue. Hez alive. That's more than many can say. Geoffrey Gray returns to his wife in Essex. He doesn't talk about the war much. What can he say? How can he explain what it was like to dive through curtains of flak, to watch friends die, to smell death at 6,000 feet? He can't. So he doesn't. David Evans goes back to university, then becomes a photographic officer. The exhilaration he felt during those final missions never quite leaves him. Nothing in civilian life compares to flying combat at 400 miles per hour, 3 feet above the ground, the world blurring past. But Hez grateful for the boredom, grateful for the peace, grateful to be alive. The Typhoon's moment in history is brief but decisive. From September 1941, when the first squadron received the aircraft, to February 1946, when the last Typhoon is retired, less than 5 years pass. The aircraft spends most of that time plagued by problems. Engine failures, structural weaknesses, a reputation as a widowmaker. But for 1 year, June 1944 to May 1945, it becomes the most feared ground attack aircraft in the European theater. Its legacy is written in smoke and fire across France, Belgium, Holland, and Germany. In the destroyed tanks at Mortain, in the killing ground at Falaise, in the abandoned vehicles scattered across every road the Germans used to retreat, in the psychological terror that made Wehrmacht soldiers abandon functioning equipment and run for cover at the sound of a Napier Sabre engine. The numbers tell part of the story. Over 300 Typhoons built, more than 500 lost on operations, more than 220,000 rocket projectiles fired, countless vehicles destroyed, 50 enemy aircraft shot down after D-Day alone. But numbers don't capture what the Typhoon meant. To the Allied armies it meant close air support that could be delivered within minutes, within yards of the front line. To the RAF pilots who flew it, it meant a second chance. An aircraft that nearly failed but redeemed itself through sheer brutal effectiveness. To the German soldiers who faced it, it meant terror. The sound of death diving from above. The sight of rockets streaking toward you. The knowledge that daylight movement meant probable death. To the young men who died flying it, it meant one last mission, one last attack, one last dive into fire and steel. In the end, the Typhoon accomplished what it was built to do. Not as a high-altitude interceptor, its original purpose at which it failed completely, but as a ground attack monster, a role it never intended for but mastered absolutely. It broke the back of the German counterattack at Mortain. It destroyed the German 7th Army at Falaise. It chased the Wehrmacht across Western Europe. It helped shorten the war. And then, its work done, it disappeared into history. 79 years later, only a handful of Typhoons survive. Most were scrapped, their aluminum melted down and reused, their engines stripped for parts, their thick wings cut apart and forgotten. A few sit in museums, static displays, their Sabre engines silent, their rockets and cannons empty. Visitors walk past them, glancing at the placards, reading about the troubled fighter that became a legendary ground attack aircraft. But the placards don't capture the sound of the Sabre's roar. The feel of pulling 6 Gs in a rocket attack. The terror of flying through flak so thick the sky looked solid. The weight of losing half your squadron in a single month. The exhilaration of surviving another mission. Those memories died with the men who lived them. What remains is the legacy. The Typhoon proved that air power could decide ground battles. That close air support properly executed could break armies. That psychological warfare, the terror of attack from above, could be as effective as actual destruction. That even troubled temperamental aircraft could change the course of history if flown by determined pilots and supported by dedicated ground crews. And it left one final lesson learned by every German soldier who survived the war. When you hear that sound, the distinctive roar of a Napier Sabre engine, you run. You abandon your tank. You leave your truck. You drop your rifle and dive into the nearest ditch. Because the Typhoons are coming. And nothing, not armor, not concrete, not courage, can save you. The Luftwaffe pilots who thought they ruled France learned this lesson the hard way. For 4 years they owned the skies. For 1 year they were hunted. And in that 1 year the outcome of the war in Western Europe was decided. Not by grand strategy or brilliant tactics, but by young men in troubled aircraft diving out of the summer sky with 8 rockets and 4 cannons and absolutely nothing to lose. The Typhoons hunted them down, and the masters of France became the prey.